We need younger ideas for our 3D printing division. My name is Oliver Banner. I'm 52 years old, and I had just heard my career flushed down the drain by a supervisor who looked like he still lived off energy drinks and meal preps. Trevor Walsh had been with North Peak Engineering for 3 months. I had been there for 16 years. I stood in his glass office, watching him fumble through files he clearly didn't understand. Behind him, through the window, I could see the production floor. 8 massive industrial 3D printers running in perfect sync. Every machine followed calibration protocols I had written. Every parameter, every tolerance, every failsafe. All of it came from me, my experience, my hands, my sleepless nights. Oliver, I appreciate everything you've done, Trevor said, not looking up from his tablet, but the industry is moving fast. We need to modernize our thinking. I had built this department from 2 basic printers into a manufacturing powerhouse, pulling in $4 million a year. But apparently, that no longer counted as innovative. When do you want it gone? I asked. End of the week, ideally. HR will help with the process. I nodded. No scenes. No begging. I'd seen younger men escorted out for less. I'll pack my things. Actually, he said, finally glancing up, just your personal items. Security protocol. I got it. They didn't want me leaving behind a manual or a trail. I walked back to my desk, past the machines that had been more reliable than half the managers I'd worked under. Jason, one of my junior techs, looked up. Everything okay, Mr. Banner? Just fine. Keep those tolerances tight, Jason. I took only my coffee mug, a photo of my late wife, Karen, and my father's old toolkit. Everything else, the protocols, the diagnostics, the preventative checks, stayed where they'd always been, in my head. As I left, I spotted Trevor in his office, probably calling recruiters, searching for someone younger, cheaper, and completely unaware of what he was walking into. I handed my ID to security and stepped outside. The printers kept humming. For now, I joined North Peak back when 3D printing was still called rapid prototyping. We had 2 clunky machines that couldn't print a spoon without warping. But I saw the future. I learned the software, studied polymers, figured out how temperature, dust, and even ambient humidity impacted every build. Karen used to joke I treated those printers like people. She wasn't wrong. Each had its quirks. One overheated without extra fans. One jammed unless you sweet-talked the feeder. I knew them like old friends. When the company expanded, they gave me the keys. I wrote every rule, every safety check, every QA standard. And for 16 years, we had 0 catastrophic failures. Then came Trevor, MBA, 3 months in. Big words like Industry 4.0 and AI automation. Never ran a printer in his life. He dismissed my warnings about complexity. Our machines weren't just hardware, they were a living system. And he treated them like numbers in a report. He started bringing in consultants, people who didn't know the difference between PTG and PLA. He talked about replacing our setup with newer tech and cheaper labor. I resisted. He called it fear of change. Last week, he asked me to prepare handover documentation. I told him it was already in the system. What I didn't say was that the most vital numbers, those little secrets that kept the system balanced, were never written down. They were learned, earned, stored in memory from years of trial and error. Late nights, quiet calibrations when the floor was empty. Now I was in my truck, watching him through the window, wondering how long it would take. That weekend, I stayed home, finished a wooden jewelry box I'd promised Karen years ago. For once, no alarms, no print errors, just sandpaper and peace. Monday morning, I didn't drive to North Peak. I brewed coffee and went back to the box, smoothing out the edges, wondering what came next. 52 wasn't old, but in tech, it felt ancient. The 3D printing industry was tight-knit. Word would spread. Trevor would make sure of that. My phone rang. Mr. Banner, it's Jason. We're having problems with Machine 3. The tolerances are drifting, and I can't figure out what's causing it. I almost answered. Almost walked him through the calibration override that would fix everything. But then I heard Trevor's voice echoing in my memory about needing younger ideas and fresh perspectives. I don't work there anymore, Jason. You need to ask Mr. Walsh. He told us to figure out ourselves. Said the manuals have all we need. The manuals? I nearly laughed. The official documentation covered the basics: startup, shutdown, routine maintenance. But it didn't mention the subtle tweaks for dealing with the HVAC quirks, the seasonal humidity swings, or how the concrete floor's thermal expansion nudged the entire rig out of alignment. That kind of adjustment wasn't science. It was instinct. I'm sorry, Jason. My hands are tied. I hung up and went back to woodworking. The jewelry box was nearly done. Karen would have loved the way the carved rose petals caught the afternoon light. Tuesday, Jason called again. Machine 3 was still drifting. Now Machine 5 was showing signs too. By Wednesday, his voice sounded strained. 4 machines running out of tolerance. Quality control was rejecting nearly a third of their parts. I didn't answer after that. Thursday, I drove past North Peak on my way to get varnish. The parking lot was crowded with unfamiliar cars. Consultants, I guessed. Outsiders trying to solve problems that shouldn't exist. Friday morning, I was applying the final coat of varnish when the phone rang. Not Jason this time. Oliver, it's Trevor. We need to talk. I don't work for you anymore, remember? There have been some technical issues. Your expertise would be valuable. Technical issues, I repeated, like the machines had caught a cold. I set down my brush and stared out the window. Karen had always loved mornings like this. Bright, peaceful, honest. What kind of issues? Production slowdowns. Quality inconsistencies. Nothing we can't handle, but if they could handle it, you wouldn't be calling me. I might be available for consulting work, I said. $200 an hour. 4-hour minimum. Payment up front. A pause. That's steep, Oliver. That's the market rate. Emergency rates, actually. Take it or leave it. He took it. I showed up Monday morning with a visitor badge. The production floor looked like a battlefield. 3 printers down entirely, the others whining under misalignment. Jason met me at the entrance looking like he hadn't slept in days. Mr. Banner, thank God. We've tried everything. I checked each unit, read the data, listened to the motors. The drift was exactly what I predicted. The adjustments no one understood had unraveled. What VE you tried? We recalibrated per manual, brought in the vendor techs, even flew in a consultant from Stratus. They all say the specs look fine, but nothing works for more than a few hours. Print jobs failing. Part rejects stacking up. It was all going wrong exactly how I knew it would. Trevor found me mid-walk-throw, sweating in his suit. Well, Oliver, can this be fixed? Depends. What did you change after I left? Nothing major. New calibration advice, some efficiency tweaks, a few software updates. Efficiency tweaks. I almost smiled. Show me. For 2 hours, he walked me through every so-called improvement. Print speeds jacked up. Feed rates altered. Default temps reset. Every change subtle but significant. Things that looked smart in Excel and broke systems in real life. This is fixable, I said, but it'll take time. 2 weeks minimum. More if your changes cause baseline drift. He went pale. We got delivery timelines. Active contracts. We can't afford 2 weeks down. Then maybe you shouldn't have fired the guy who built the system. I watched the wheels turn behind his eyes. Weighing costs. Missed deadlines. Explaining to his boss why nothing worked anymore. What do you need? Full system access. Authority to roll back anything. And no interference from your consultants. Done. That day, I started mapping the disaster zone. Each machine's status. Each adjustment needed. One by one, I would bring them back. As I continued the calibrations, I realized something unsettling. They hadn't just altered my original parameters. They had rewritten them in ways that created constant instability. The machines were now trapped in a cycle of manual oversight. Without someone who truly understood the balance between temperature shifts, humidity changes, material flow, and the delicate print tolerances, consistency would never return. Trevor hadn't just let me go. He'd broken something foundational. By Wednesday morning, while calibrating Machine 7, I noticed something alarming. The maintenance log showed software changes I had never approved. Someone had accessed the core systems after I left and modified inter-machine communication protocols. I called Jason over. Who installed these updates? He squinted at the logs. Mr. Walsh brought in a consultant last week. Nexra Labs, I think. Said he could boost our network efficiency. Nexra Labs. Never heard of them. But the edits were precise, too advanced to be some quick-fix contractor's work. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about control. Dependency. I spent an hour tracing their digital fingerprints. Well, I found her in my stomach. This consultant hadn't just tweaked software. They installed remote access tools. Nexra Labs now had full visibility into our machines, our production data, and our calibration settings. Jason, where's the consulting contract? Walsh keeps that stuff. Why? I didn't answer. I went straight to Trevor's office and asked to see the Nexra agreement. He looked irritated. Why? Are the updates causing more issues? Just let me see it. He opened the file on his screen and turned it toward me. My worst fears were confirmed. Nexra wasn't just a tech consultant. They were a competing 3D printing company disguised as a partner. The contract was labeled as an optimization agreement, but buried in the fine print were clauses giving them ongoing access to our production environment for quality assurance. Trevor, they played you. What are you talking about? I highlighted the paragraphs. They're not helping you. They're watching you fail. Then they'll swoop in to replace you. Look at their website. Trevor pulled it up. Case studies filled the screen. Companies that switched from in-house to outsource printing. Firms just like North Peak. These updates, they're designed to destabilize your printers. Meanwhile, Nexra gathers all your production data. Once your operations collapse, they'll offer to take over entirely. He stared at the screen in disbelief. The dawning horror told me he understood the depth of the mistake. He had fired the only person who could have caught this earlier. Can you fix it? Maybe, but not in 2 weeks. This isn't a patch job. You need to rebuild your software foundation from scratch. Months of work. How much would that cost? I hesitated. My thoughts drifted to Karen's finished jewelry box. To 16 years of loyalty repaid with silence. To Trevor's faith in fresh perspectives. Depends, I said. Do you want this fixed properly? Or do you want to keep pretending experience doesn't matter? For once, Trevor Walsh looked genuinely afraid. I left his office without answering. Spent the rest of the day compiling evidence. Screenshots of the unauthorized installs. A copy of the Nexra contract. A breakdown of their sabotage methods. That evening, I called Marcus Wright, an old friend from my early machining days. He'd moved into corporate security at a Fortune 500 firm. He spoke both languages, mechanical and digital. Oliver, been a while. How's retirement? Not retired, just fired. And I found something you need to hear. I told him everything. From a system breaches to Nexra's covert access to our full production schema. He was quiet, then said, "This isn't just about you. If they're doing this to North Peak, they're likely targeting others. This is federal-level industrial sabotage. What would you do? Document everything, but don't alert them. If Nexra knows you're onto them, they'll erase the trail. What about North Peak? They have contracts, commitments. That's not your concern anymore. Remember? You were fired." He was right, but it didn't sit right. Jason and the others hadn't made these choices. They deserved better than to watch their department crumble from betrayal. The next morning, I walked back into North Peak with a proposal. Trevor looked like he hadn't slept. I had thought long and hard about their situation. While I walked into Trevor's office, I didn't wait for pleasantries. "I can fix this," I said, "but it has to be on my terms." "What are you proposing?" he asked. "Shut down the 3D printing line for 1 week. We'll tell everyone it's scheduled maintenance. In that time, I'll rebuild the software infrastructure from scratch, using clean backups from before the tampering. That kind of downtime will cost hundreds of thousands," Trevor said. "Less than what Nexra is siphoning off from you every day. They're not just breaking your machines, Trevor. They're replicating your part designs, your customer specs, and your processes. Every hour you stay connected gives them more power." He fell silent. "What would this cost?" $50,000, I said flatly, and a written apology to the technicians for the mess of the past 2 weeks. 50,000? That's That's the going rate for emergency cyber-physical remediation. You can pay me now or pay Nexera when they offer to replace your whole operation. He considered it. I could see him weighing the fallout. 50 grand was steep, but nothing compared to losing the division entirely. Fine, he said, but I want a guarantee. If I can't restore full operations in a week, you owe me nothing. That afternoon, I began shutting things down. To the outside, it looked routine, but under the surface, I was cutting out a cancer. I worked around the clock, reinstalling protocols from memory, restoring backups, testing every link in the network. By Friday, clean servers were online, fully isolated. But I had one more move planned. Monday morning, I flipped the switches. One by one, every machine came alive with perfect calibration. The rhythmic hum filled the floor, exactly how I'd tuned them over 16 years. Meanwhile, Nexera's network was receiving fake data, bogus part specs, customer profiles, artificial error patterns. I'd altered their code before deleting it. Now, they were mining lies. At 10 a.m., I called Trevor to the floor. Everything's running. We're back to full capacity. He looked around, visibly relieved. How long will it hold? Indefinitely, unless someone brings in another outside expert. I handed him a flash drive. Documentation of everything Nexera did. System logs, access points, and evidence. I've also filed a report with the FBI. He paled. The FBI? Industrial sabotage. Cross-state data theft. They'll be interested. Trevor looked like he'd been punched. That means that you were played by professionals, and that you fired the only person who could have stopped it sooner. I watched as he processed the depth of the mistake. Not just the security breach, but the threat to his own career. What now, he asked. Now your operation's stable. Your data is safe, and you've learned not to discard experience. I turned to leave, and Trevor, make the check out to Oliver Banner Consulting. I'm going independent. 3 weeks later, I was in my garage polishing a custom tool jig for a client in Phoenix when the news hit. Nexera Labs had been raided by federal agents. Their execs were facing charges of espionage and data theft. Investigators had uncovered evidence of sabotage across over 40 companies. Jason called that afternoon. Mr. Banner, did you see the news? I did. They say Nexera stole millions. This is insane. Not really. Industrial espionage is big business. Walsh keeps asking about you. Think he wants to apologize. Tell him apologies are free, I said, grinning. But advice still runs $200 an hour. A week later, I got a call from an aerospace firm in Colorado Springs. They'd heard about the North Peak incident and wanted help setting up a new 3D printing division. We want to do it right. No shortcuts, no quick hacks. Solid design, reliable systems. That's something I can help with. The following Monday, I drove out. Karen's jewelry box rode with me, carefully packed. I plan to give it to our daughter in Denver. Karen would have liked that. The facility in Colorado was well-run, clean, purposeful, the kind of place where skill mattered more than buzzwords. It felt like a good place for a new beginning.